Welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show here from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel, wherever you download your podcasts, and of course over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. We just finished watching Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. It was more than 4 hours long. Republicans actually denied for a second round of questioning, denied Democrats' request for a second round of questioning. Nevertheless, this went for over 4 hours. So with that much time between Pete Hegseth and these senators, obviously Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are now in the majority in the Senate, so Roger Wicker was the chairman of that committee. They controlled the hearing, but Pete Hegseth faced a lot of questions from Democrats, ranging from very salacious topics to sometimes serious ones. Alyssa Slotkin, former CIA officer who now represents Michigan in the Senate, had some, I thought, legitimate questions to Pete Hegseth about whether he would obey or disobey a presidential directive or specific presidential directive, which is, interesting whether you support a Hegseth or you don't. Maybe you want to make sure that he doesn't, break from Donald Trump if you're a Trump loyalist. And maybe on the other hand, you want to make sure that he's sort of above the partisanship of the president if you're a Democrat. So that was an interesting round of questioning, but we thought it would be helpful actually to take those 4 hours and distill it into a reel where you can watch what were, from our perspective, some of the most important exchanges of the entire hearing. So here you go. Take a look.
The senator from Virginia starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives?
You needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated.
Senator, anonymous smears.
Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CVA team.
Anonymous smears.
How many genders are there? Tough one.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct? But I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
You said in your statement, you don't want politics in the DOD. Everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. It's a silly thing to say.
Having my back.
You are a misogynist. Not only that, you are a Christian Zionist.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
Okay, so that ranged from drunks and drag queens to some serious questions about finances and whatnot. But I think Democrats actually were in an interesting position today. And that position is, pitting the system against the system's disruptors. And this puts us into kind of a trap as, the American people, right? We know we have a broken system. So then you have to sort of find disruptors who are disrupting the system without also making things worse. And what we saw on display from Democrats, of course, I'm a conservative, so take my biases for what they are. Politically, though, Democrats were sort of breathlessly defending the system. And I don't think they had to do that to question Pete Hegseth. You can question Pete Hegseth's lack of management experience at this massive scale. This is something we saw Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat, go in on Hegseth on. You can do that. You can question some of his conduct towards his wife, as we saw Senator Tim Kaine do, his wives, I should say, as we saw Senator Tim Kaine do, and call into question his character without being sanctimonious and so defensive of the status quo. And that is the needle Democrats had to thread today and have to thread into the future. And I just don't think they did it. And it puts the country in an interesting situation where the public wants to err on the side of the disruptors over the status quo, which sometimes means taking the side of people, that aren't qualified disruptors. And I think there are really serious questions about whether Pete Hegseth was the best pick for the Department of Defense. And I say that as somebody who thinks the Department of Defense desperately needs a disruptor. And I think a lot of members of the public will say, we're going to err on the side of Hegseth over the side of what Elizabeth Warren, over the side of Tim Kaine, over the side of people who have defended a broken system forever and are continuing to defend that system right now, are continuing to say, we don't want to disrupt the Pentagon in this way or that way. And, maybe you could get them to concede that there are problems here and there, but to question Pete Hegseth as though, how dare you step into this immaculate system really was, I think, tone deaf, politically unhelpful, and not substantively that helpful either. Of course, when Republicans are talking about the other senators being drunk and the drag shows that have been, brought into the military, the public looks at that and says, yep, we agree with Republicans here. These are serious problems. And Democrats in this hearing made themselves out to be defenders of that system. And as silly as it sounds to talk about drag and how many genders there are, I get it. What Washington doesn't understand is when those clips circulate to the American public, people look at that and it makes them way more willing to support somebody who's completely a radical disruptor, or pledges to be, like Pete Hegseth, a radical disruptor of the bureaucracy. Whether that translates into sort of the ideology of the foreign policy establishment on things like Israel or Ukraine is another question, but at least the bureaucracy, which is tends to lean left or tends to lean towards the Democratic Party, to look like you're defending that system is really unfortunate for Democrats. And you'd think after Donald Trump's second win in November, they'd be a little bit more tonally, let's say, in line with the public, or prepared to tonally look in line with the public, to focus on criticisms that don't come across or imply or look predicated on defenses of the system. And honestly, I just think they failed at that big time in this 4+ hour hearing, because there are really legitimate questions about Hegseth. The Pentagon, Gary Peters talked about this. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Just crazy amount. 3.3 million service members and civilians, I think, is the figure that he used. It's a crazy amount of people. He said few people, even in the corporate sector, have experienced managing anything at that scale. Totally true. Pete Hegseth has managed a couple of significant, couple 100 people organizations, and he's been in positions in the military where he was overseeing different things, and those are legitimate experiences. They don't compare. Donald Trump nominated the head of Exxon Mobil, which probably has more comparable scale management to head up the Pentagon, or other people nominate leaders from inside the Pentagon. And I think, nobody really wants someone from the system, but then you're sort of caught in that trap between plucking someone from the system or plucking someone from outside the system who just can't possibly, have that much experience at that scale managing people. And so it's a legitimate question, but to do it in a way that is, how dare you? How dare you think that you could manage this complicated system as somebody who was only, defending veterans in these different organizations? That comes across poorly. And, when Mark Kelly, who's from Arizona, and Jackie Rosen, who's from Nevada, these are swing states for Democrats. When Mark Kelly was saying he just wants to see transparency, basically said the most important thing to him in a Pentagon head is transparency, he voted for Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin obviously was keeping his serious illness from the public. This is a defender of Joe Biden in Mark Kelly, and that stuff just hits the public is smarter than that. The public sees through that, and to not be able to thread that needle, I mean, it's a hard line to walk for Democrats politically. There's no question about it. But I think this was an early preview that they're struggling enormously to figure out a way to kind of approach this Trump 2.0 administration that isn't politically toxic, because it looks like a defense of the system. It doesn't mean that Republicans have no responsibility to put forward reasonable answers to these serious problems. Disruptors should be reasonable and capable and qualified. And the more the system, think about the FBI. Imagine Kash Patel's confirmation hearing, Democrats defending, jealously guarding the integrity of the FBI from this evil disruptor. The more you defend a broken system and close your eyes to the serious problems, the more likely you are to get less and less serious disruptors, because the public is going to be more and more tolerant of less and less serious disruptors because they know something radical needs to change. And so I think Democrats would serve the country well by figuring out a way to thread that needle more capably. We just didn't see that at the Hegseth confirmation hearing. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here. We are watching all of these confirmation battles really closely. We're days away from Trump swearing in. Make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Thanks for watching.